No, I don't think we're using it effectively. Or to its capacity. Let me rephrase
Yeah,
it. Or to its
yeah,
capacity. Um, Listen, I believe media will always be changing, but the message never changes.
yeah,
And so that means we can use different forms of media, uh, but the message has to remain the same. We can't change the message to draw people. We have to maintain that message of the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. But how are we doing that? Are we making Jesus look good on social media? Here in the last year, we have upped. I'm speaking for our
yeah,
church, Lighthouse. We have upped our social media presence in consistency. We have really tried to at least be posting something every day, as far as encouraging. And sometimes I think churches can get in the trap of using social media as an announcement platform.
yes, 100%.
Yeah, and I think there's a place for that, but I don't believe that's what people are there for. I don't think that's what they're looking for. And if our feed is just announcement after announcement after announcement, pretty soon our stuff's going to get bypassed over, and it's going to we're just going to keep scrolling, and we don't want that. So I really we have several people, you being one of them, several people that help us with the different aspects of our social media, our YouTube and our
Yeah,
Facebook. We're not as consistent on Instagram right now as I'd like to be, but baby steps, I guess. But
yeah,
uh, uh, and you talked about demographic. To be honest with you, the largest demographic that we have interacts with us on Facebook. Um,
okay,
that
yeah,
I can't speak for any other church, but our stuff on Facebook seems to be where people are interacting with us. Now, we do a lot of event pushes we do a lot of event boosts on
yeah,
Facebook where we're buying ad time for our events. And so that's kind of where people will interact with us a lot. But the people that work with our Facebook feed and Facebook posts, I just let them know that 80% of what we post on Facebook needs to be encouraging. It needs to be
yeah,
uplifting. 20% is okay for announcements. Sometimes I think that might be a little much, but
yeah.
20% is okay for announcements. But 80% of what we're posting on there, it needs to be shareable. It needs to be likable. And
Algorithms push it more if it's,
yeah,
engaging content rather than it is displaying content.
no doubt about it. And so just over the past year, well, just over the past 6 months, we have upped our consistency in that. Before that, we were okay. We were hit and miss, but now I think we're a little bit more consistent in that, and we're reaping the benefits from that.
Oh, yeah, yes.
We have people visit every week that Facebook was the first place they went, and our YouTube channel was the second place they went to watch a service before they came. And so before they ever drove on our parking lot, they were at the two most visited social media platforms where we have a presence. And when they got on our Facebook page, they didn't just see announcement after announcement after announcement. They saw encouragement. They saw edifying things that they could share and be a part of. And I think that makes a big difference.
I think it does too. I think, not just, like, understanding your demographic, but understanding where you succeed the most, I think is really important
Right.
for churches to know. Like, you shouldn't be pushing all your ad money to Instagram if you're getting, all your
Sure.
engagements from Facebook.
Sure.
Um, but I think, probably, I would say since COVID time, people have not just people, but I think churches have been kind of forced to
Sure.
go on that social media.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
And I think that there's some good things to that. I think there's some bad things that I think we could unpack it a little bit. But to kind of just overview, um, how much would you say our church, or maybe kind of reset, not kind of reset itself
Here's
media
here
wise, that it was
here's
like,
what I think. We're sitting here 2024. It's been 4 years.
yeah,
It's
I was
been
thinking
4
about that when I was doing my
it
notes. It's like
it it's been
four.
4 years since we had to really shift to adjust for what was happening in the world. And so it's getting further in our rear view mirror at this point.
Yes.
And listen, a lot of bad came out of COVID. I feel sorry for everybody that lost a loved one due to COVID, that got very sick due to COVID, that are still seeing symptoms because of COVID. So there's a lot of bad we could talk about. But I will say this, that I believe, now I'll speak for our church, but I'm speaking as the church as a whole,
Yeah.
local churches across the world. They were forced into doing something that they were not comfortable doing. Now,
Yeah.
Lighthouse, we were already streaming our services, so that was not so big of a shift for us. We were already streaming our services. We already had a multi-camera system set up. So we were okay as far as how to do it. What I believe it really helped push us in a direction of flexibility in what we do with it. So during COVID, we got into the podcast realm. During
Mm.
which we had never done anything like that before, so we got into the podcast realm. During COVID, we got into digital Bible reading plans, where we were reading the Bible plans together online through the Bible app. We were doing Zoom prayer meetings during COVID. That all started. We didn't even know what Zoom was
Yeah.
before
No
before
one did.
COVID. And so, so there were so many things that we got introduced to, that we said, well, my goodness, these things, why we're using them right now, we may not like why we're using them right now, but there are benefits in using these things. And so, listen, there are every Monday morning at our church, I host coffee with the pastor. People come have coffee with me. It's not really a no agenda time that they can come and just chat. But we also provide a Zoom feed for that, for anybody that wants to jump on. People jump on. Maybe they're at work. They just click on. They hear the conversation happening. So 4 years ago, we wouldn't have even have thought about something like that.
Yeah.
But these are things that is just, at least for us at Lighthouse, that is just the natural way we think. I know before anybody visits our church and comes to hear me preach in person, they are going to hear me preach on our YouTube channel. They are going to hear me preach on our Facebook page. So if that's the case, then our live feed has to be the best it possibly can be. Our YouTube channel has to have other content on it,
Mhm.
so they can see that as well. So these are just default things that we think about now, that 4 years ago we would have never thought about prior to COVID. And so I believe it was the Lord. Listen, how in the world is everybody in the world going to see the Antichrist? Well, they're going to see him over the internet.
Yeah.
They're going to see a live feed over the internet. Okay, so if that's the way the whole world is going to see the Antichrist, well, it could be that that is the way the whole world is eventually going to hear the gospel as well. So
Absolutely.
so let's make the gospel go as far as it possibly can, and that means it goes beyond 2581 Northwestern Pike to different states, different countries. Who knows who's going to pop on our YouTube channel or our Facebook page? Who knows who's going to see the share that one of our church members shared? So I'm always thinking about that. Now, I don't preach to an online audience. I preach to the people that are in the room. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And I now, and please don't get me wrong. I don't believe that watching an online service is ever going to come close to being in the room where the spirit is moving, where the preaching is happening. But it can provide a window and access to the word of God and the gospel, and somebody hearing it for the first time. So I think COVID was a springboard in all of that, and it has become just how, at least at our church, how we think naturally now.
I think a lot of times, well, at least for most churches in 2020, it was the only way they could meet. And I think
Sure,
since then, churches are trying to figure out where it really is. Because, like you said,
sure,
it doesn't hold the same weight as an in service, but it still provides value. So
absolutely,
where do we put it at? And I think a
sure,
lot of churches are still working and struggling with that. They're trying to find its place in their church and also their with their in their community outreach. But I
sure.
think one thing. Um, that I think, what we find well, if you're doing especially if we're talking about YouTube and Facebook, especially during COVID, well, even since then, people were not churches are not very prepared
Mm,
for that kind of
mm,
that kind of scenario, and I
sure,
think that maybe for the training and most people aren't trained, how to have that multicam setup, how to have your live feed and your Facebook feed at the same time, what do you use? And I don't think there's a lot of resources out there that are specific for church or not just for church training, but just for any training in that. And I
oh, you're
think
right.
there's some good YouTube channels out there, absolutely, that will teach people. But I think that's one thing that we're kind of missing today in 2024 as a church. We're teaching people how to do door to door knocking, but I think door to door knocking social media can be almost just as effective. You can reach
Sure,
maybe 200 people with a YouTube video that you can, reach 10 people on door to door knocking. But we're not teaching our local church how to do that, and not just ours. I'm just saying in general. I think that's personally where I could see maybe where the church could maybe take a step up and be able to start weaponizing it as and utilizing it, probably a better word,
yeah,
for the local community. And but I've always said like my generation, I think, or maybe I would maybe say yours, but I'd say is the first to experience the billion on any video. I
sure.
don't I forget what date it was, but that's huge. Like no one thought about. I don't think that hit anybody. It's like we got to be taking advantage that someone in Thailand, Brazil, and the United States can all be hearing the gospel of Christ all at the exact same time from the exact same person. It's
Right.
like I don't think the church maybe isn't tapping into that as much as we could. I know I
Well,
was
here's the value of it. The value of it is huge. Um,
yes.
where does it fall? It ought to fall in a pretty high place, for sure. And going back to what you said, there are lots of people that will come in and train your Sunday school teachers and your youth workers, or you can go to a conference and hear a lot of things that'll help you in teaching people, and all of that is great. That is needed. But I'll tell you something that I believe that, because we're about ready to go into a semi large building project at our church, which is phase 2 of I don't know how many phases, but phase 2 of a building project. Well, phase 3 of our building project is going to be a expanded and remodeled auditorium. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that our 40-year-old sound system is going to be ripped out, and all of heaven's angels will be singing on that day, because it'll be such a grand and momentous day when we rip it out. Because we tend to try to do things ourselves because there are not a lot of resources out there. Even people that will come in and say, "We will come in and we will dial your sound system in." Now, are there secular companies that do that? Absolutely, there are. But we have to always understand, whenever a secular company is coming into a church, they're looking at a secular way. They're looking at it as a venue. And a church is dialed in differently than a venue is dialed in. And so
Mm.
there are not a lot of people that are available that will come in and say, we will dial your sound system in, we will get all your camera system set up for you. There's not a lot of people or companies that do that. There are church consulting companies that will sub those things out, but most of the time they're secular companies, and nothing wrong with that at all. I just like working with people that have the same end goal in mind that I have in mind. In other words, there are going to be people sitting in this room, and when people sit in this room, there's one goal, and that is for them to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ, for them to grow in their walk with the Lord. Well, if the sound is wrong, that is going to hinder that. Okay. I can't tell, well, I can tell you because
Yeah.
you're there and you've seen it, how many times I have had to get up. Now, I was an assistant pastor for a long time before I was ever a pastor at the same church. I've been at our church for almost 18 years. And so I was an assistant pastor for most of that. And so I still know probably more about the sound and audio than probably anybody else in the room, including the people that are working in the sound booth. Nothing against them. They know a lot about it. I'm just the one who ran the wire. I'm just the one who knows it. And so there are times where I've had to get up out of the front seat and walk back to the sound booth because our entire sound system has been patched together over and over and over and over again. It's just we need some people that are willing to come in and teach a church audio team how to use an equalizer on a
Yeah.
soundboard. If how do the projectors work? How does the screen work? What's the best resolution if you're going to design a slide? What's the best resolution to design a slide at to put on a screen? These things are maybe second nature to some people, but to some people, they have absolutely no clue. So I think you're right. I think we're missing the mark on teaching people a very valuable thing because media, social media, multimedia, audiovisual, none of that is going away. It is
Yeah.
not a fad. It is not going away. It is only going to ramp up because uh, that is how this world is going to fall under the delusion of the Antichrist. And so it's not going to go away. It's just going to be getting more ramped up. Well, if it's here, let's use it and use it effectively for the gospel of Jesus Christ while we can do that.
100%. I remember I was listening to Dallas Jenkins